everybody, this is Jamie with the Institute for Creative Mindfulness, here with Satyavani Gayatri for episode 2 of Tea and Take.
Tea and Take, cheers.
So, here this week at the Amrit Yoga Institute, we have gotten, as we've been students in the Prana Awakening program, into some fascinating conversations about all things yoga and
religion and
cults and
so good
debriefing Wild Wild Country in meticulous detail and watching the SNL sketch on it. And I think one of our teachers actually started mentioning the Rajneesh in a session, and we saw each other across the room.
It was like we're there.
Gotcha. So a question that comes up a lot, and when I took my YTT here, it was actually my oral final exam question.
Oh my goodness.
Is yoga a religion? And I bring it up because those of us who share the practice of yoga, who teach yoga, get asked this a lot.
Totally.
And I know my canned answer, and I also know some other feelings I have shifting. So, my friend, what's your take?
Okay. Religion and yoga. The first thing I will say is religion and yoga are not the same. And I think I shared this with you. I have a couple of things I'd like to say regarding this. The first is the late George...
Unburden.
Right.
Here's your place.
Here it is, right? We're doing this. The late George Fierstein, who was one of the foremost academic scholars in yoga philosophy, would say that about yoga that it's not a religion, it's a spiritual practice. And the difference between religion and spirituality is that religion is something that is done for you. Spirituality is something you have to do yourself. And I've always carried that with me as it relates to that question about yoga and is it a religion. If we're to swing the pendulum really, really far and talk about daily practices and ritual, etc., yes, yoga has those patterns, if you would, or similarities, characteristics, or gunas, if you want to call them that from an Ayurvedic perspective, that have similar characteristics as it relates to religions. But the reality is that it's a completely different orientation. And it is something that you either choose for yourself or you don't choose for yourself. A lot of us are born into a religion. I was raised Catholic, recovering Catholic now, did 12 years. And many
I
of
did my time too.
Right, you did your time, and a lot of our contemporaries were born into something, so we didn't have a choice. For me, yoga is an evolutionary spiritual practice that I have a choice not only to choose that path, but also to make choices along that path. And are there scriptures that support various different aspects of yoga? Absolutely, but it's not doctrinal.
Tell me more about that, in your view.
So doctrinal to me is, this is how it is, this is the word, this is the interpretation, and that's it. And you're either in or you're out. With yoga, there is scriptures that are to be absorbed and taken in personally and then applied accordingly. And there'll be something that you'll read from the Yoga Sutras or the Bhagavad Gita or the Srimad Bhagavatam or the Upanishads, and that might resonate with you in one stage in your life in a certain way and then resonate with you in a different way, where I feel like those things are more timeless and more expansive.
Right.
Whereas having been raised Catholic, it was like, these are the 10 Commandments, this is what God meant, and that's how it rolls out.
What's interesting for me is, and as we know, yoga as it's practiced in the West comes in all different flavors.
Oh, do it ever.
Oh yeah, from practices that any of the spiritual aspects are so watered down. And something Gurudev says here that I really like, because one of the trigger points for me can be, when I was here this summer, Gurudev will often say how yoga is being practiced in the West right now isn't really yoga. And I could get into this, that sounds like people I grew up with saying, well, you're not really a Christian. So I had some of that. However,
interesting.
Here's how he carried it, though. He goes, it's not really yoga, but keep calling it yoga. Because that may then lead people to the heart of the teachings. And I really liked that, and I really resonated with that. Yeah, isn't that cool?
Absolutely. To add to that, he has also said that if it doesn't change your life, it's not yoga.
Word.
And to me, when you change and you transform your life, there are new discoveries, there are epiphanies, there are openings. Whereas when I grew up in a very traditional religion, and this is not to bash Catholics or any Christian sector, I mean that's not my point here. Just speaking from my own experience,
sure.
that it was almost fear-driven. That and I didn't feel expansive or open. I actually felt like God was watching me at all angles, and that like if I didn't clean up my room, I was going to hell.
I relate.
So if you swing the pendulum in the opposite direction, then we have, is yoga a cult?
Cult simply comes from the Latin meaning to worship, for you word nerds out there.
Yeah, there you go. And are there yogic cults? Yes. Are there religious cults? Yes. Are there spiritual cults? Yes.
Are there cults of personality in the
It was
yoga
a
communities?
great song back in the day.
Yeah.
Cult of personality. Back in the 80s, yeah.
That's where it's at.
That's it. But if you really think about it, especially in modern Western culture, and I'll even say specifically in the United States, everything is a cult. I mean, seriously.
Denver Broncos.
There you
we were
go.
talking about this with sports teams.
Exactly. Like people.
Fan coming from fanatic.
Right. And they put on their gear on Saturday if it's a college team, Sunday if it's a professional team. And people find that absolutely okay. And we don't question it because it's been normalized. But when you've got people, sitting on a meditation cushion doing, alternate nostril breathing, that's weird. And so that whole thing, right, burn you right at the stake. And that really comes from a lack of understanding and also a lack of acceptance that somehow, because I don't understand it and because it's weird, therefore it must be a cult.
Right. That's a very fascinating take on it. So I'll speak from my experience just this week, that what I've always loved about yoga is it's very permissive. So I'm glad you spoke to that. An axiom that's often used, a folk saying in recovery circles, is that religion is for people who want to stay out of hell, and spirituality is for people who've been there,
right,
and are
currently experiencing
it, and want to get out of that. And it's very interesting. What did our teacher say today? Something about we're afraid of going to hell.
Right. But if you are stressed all the time, you're currently in it.
Yeah,
so.
you're already there.
Right.
Yet, here we're studying pretty classical Eastern Tantric yoga.
Absolutely.
The real thing.
The real deal.
If I can be so bold. And there are
Babaji
words...
for life.
Babaji. And there are words that can bring up triggers to either cultic experiences or religious experiences, like scriptural authority as a source of knowledge.
Right.
Or truth. Like big T truth being used. And of course what's taught here is that truth is anything that is universal, unchanging, and timeless.
That's right.
Yet some people...
Chandrika would be so happy.
Would he be so happy?
With your review. I love it.
Hi,
She remembered
Chandrika.
everything.
I'm your bad student, so I even got
everything.
that. So yes, I get that. Yet even when I hear that, it can bring up stuff about people beating the truth down my throat.
Absolutely.
And is there openness to discussion?
Absolutely.
Sometimes in some circles, as much as I can like it here, other yoga circles, I feel there's not openness for discussion.
And that's very true.
Yeah.
But I think that's where it moves away from the yoga in its pure form, and you're starting to integrate people with personalities and histories and all of that.
Yeah.
And that's where issues of safety come up,
Noted.
authenticity come up, etc.
Yeah.
So, one of my teachers back in Boise would say that we're all coming into the world with our karmas. And
Sure.
your karma is mixing with my karma. And, before you know it, we've got 17 people in the room because we've got so much karma that we're working through. So, so there's an element to that.
And then a question that comes up a lot, both from students I have in Ohio, that I'm sure you would have in Idaho.
Right, yeah.
All the O's.
Idaho, not Iowa or Ohio.
Yeah, I get Iowa all the time,
Oh,
too.
get it all the time. We have a shirt.
Not Iowa!
We have a shirt in Boise It was made by a local company that's got a picture of the state of Idaho on it, and across it says Iowa.
Maybe we're destined to teach in Iowa at some point.
At some point in
an
time.
episode of TNT.
I actually have an Acharya sister who lives there. So.
That's awesome. So the question I could get from people, and it's not necessarily to pick on Midwesterners, but anywhere where there's this fear, do you pray to the Hindu gods?
Oh, yeah.
In yoga. Yeah. When I took my exam here, my assistant...
Those are false gods.
Yeah. That may be for another episode.
Sounds good.
Of TNT. But yeah, a question I get a lot is that in a context like this, we like to bring in some of those aspects.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of that for me is honoring the beautiful cultures of India.
Thank you.
And the richness in
Took the
which
words right
this
out of my mouth.
beautiful practice.
Absolutely.
And for me, and this is my path, so it may differ from where you're at, God has so many ways, he, she, they, it expresses.
Absolutely.
And as somebody who does a lot with parts work and dissociative work, it makes perfect and complete total sense to me that we're reaching out to the same God that is timeless, universal, unchanging, just using different names to call upon different aspects.
Absolutely.
And I see Hindu gods, for instance, as no different than Catholics praying to saints. Maybe a little different because they're not necessarily God, but pathways to God.
But also, who defines that? I mean,
true.
That's one of the questions that I've always asked. I've done a lot of study with a lot of religions. Spent a year studying the Quran at one of our local mosques. I'm at the local Hindu temple pretty much every single day, studying the Gita and the Bhagavatam. I come from a Catholic background.
Your husband is
My husband's a Taoist priest.
Yeah.
So, like, we're all up in everybody, you know, and, like, I party with everybody.
A lot of you who follow my work would have read my poem, I Am All Religions.
There you go.
That gets at this point.
The thing is that who cares?
I don't.
You know?
But I know there are people who do.
Absolutely. But the thing is that whatever your path to that feeling of completeness, wholeness, oneness, whatever it is that you want to call, whatever that path is, let it be that path. But also allow it to evolve and change and to have different experiences with it. People get very, very hung up on these deities and, you know, what the deities said. And I think that just like you explained with Hinduism and the path of yoga, that we do discuss the gods and the goddesses and have chants and prayers for them, etc. You know what? The more blessings I can get from everybody, the better I'm going to be. Yeah. I'm going to be. But it's also about honoring that culture. I mean, would you study the Quran without giving a nod to Muhammad? No, you wouldn't.
Right.
You study the Old Testament without giving a nod to the Abrahamic tradition. No, you wouldn't do that. I mean, so there is a cultural aspect to it that needs to be honored, and I'm about all of it.
Yeah. And I know we often talk about adapting the yoga practice for settings, and even here in the teacher training, that's encouraged. I know Nurali, my senior teacher here, would say something like, if you're going into a new class for the first time and you don't know what you're walking into, you're not going to be talking about Shiva and Shakti and chanting the Asatoma prayer.
I'm going with no.
Yeah, and I would say too, because we talk about these issues in clinical counseling all the time, like if you have a belief system like Christianity, do you leave those values at the door when you're working with secular clients? And the answer is you can never leave who you are at the door. You can never leave those values at the door. Are you going to push them on people?
That's a different story.
And that's a different story. And I think there's that kind of adaptability that we can do as yoga practitioners, sharing the practice of yoga.
I think the other element to that also, Jamie, and I think you bring up a great point, is the fact that trust needs to be built first.
Yes.
That is key, regardless of what the belief system is. When I walk into, if I have to substitute for a teacher that has had a class for a really long time and I've never met these students before, you have to meet them where it is that they are.
Right.
And you establish that trust, and then as that trust builds, curiosity builds, love builds, kindness builds, these universal principles. And as a result of that, then
for sure,
when people have inquiry, you can respond.
And one thing I would say, because obviously I get most of the heat from Christians, and again, it's not slamming Christianity, because there's different flavors and ways that it expresses.
Yes, there is.
I've said that before somewhere else on this, about yoga, and the different ways and
what do you
flavors
know?
It expresses. But one thing I've loved about a lot of the great sages and yogis that I've read is an honor and a respect for Christian tradition. Yogananda cites more scripture than he does Gita or Upanishad, or just as,
Absolutely.
just as much.
Well, he used to have a picture of Jesus on his altar.
And the main picture of him that's on a lot of versions of Autobiography of Yoga, he's wearing a cross.
That's right.
And here, there's iconography from all the world religions, and
Absolutely.
obviously that's
well,
something.
Gurudev talks about Christ
Yeah,
consciousness.
Christ consciousness. Like, that's my jam. It may not be your jam. So I don't want this to come across as I'm pushing that on you, but I would ask you to keep an open mind and heart to see what can be revealed.
And that right there is the essence of yoga.
Tea and take.
Tea and take.
Join us for another episode, which will probably be through the magic of technology.
Looking forward to it.
Cheers.
Bye.